in this street, man. You turn into it, man. It's like the land time for go. You turn into it, man. It's weird. You're so close to like everything, yet you're so shut out the way. You're only in this street if you're going to be in this street. That makes sense.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Plus, it's a one way. That fucking fucks with people. That fucks with people's heads mentally. See somewhere being a one way and how tight it is, man. I remember the first time I came here, my man brought us down, and some dipshit for the housing, government housing, I'll mention, got a big box van. And see, obviously that street when you're coming to it is as tight as it is.
Yes.
They decided rather than park further down the street, there's a space to park right as you turn into it. So the box van was basically blocking the fucking street. And so I tell eventually some cunt got me to move it. It's the fucking thing. It was my sister. I had to fucking go up in the curb and all that, man. But it was piping.
It's a very strange street. I went to the Mitchell Library and I went to the archives and I looked at the original plan.
Right.
And this was the whole street, the whole block, this whole area was the poshest flats in Govan. Because it was basically for the bowler hats to roll out of bed and straight into the draftsman's workshop in the shipyard.
Oh, I see.
And that's why, you know, the flats were, for Govan standards, really top notch. This is 1901, the whole block. And they were the first tenements in Govan to have indoor toilets plumbed.
Funny you should say that. This doc just says, my pal he works for the housing, he says he watched a documentary and it says obviously back in the times it was the public toilets and that shit, or the outdoor toilets.
Yeah.
And I think it was a woman that kinda, she took the kind of the drawings to the architect like that and basically says if you're not doing this wall here you can have an indoor toilet. When you go into that toilet, man, it's like parts of it are like concrete and parts of it are wood. There's fucking holes all the walls in the toilet. I don't know what the kids in here. I think there's fucking get Mike Tyson wallpaper in here or something, man. There's fucking holes all over the fucking shop in here. Don't know what I think this used to be a brothel for me.
Okay.
Is this like that wasn't that obviously if you've seen that in the house before, but that I broke that actually my brother gave me that, so I'm kinda to blame for that one.
Right, okay.
But in there it's like red carpets, pink walls, you gotta fucking see it, man. It's eye catching. Definitely very eye catching. I don't know whose eyes are catching right enough, know what I mean?
No.
But obviously you started the Low Street Festival and all. How did you end up getting the idea for doing something like that? You had inspiration for that kind of thing?
The inspiration was that when I moved in 2016, right across, I mean, I was on the first floor, and right across from me were the local drug dealers who would sit outside the front of the flat. And I would say hello and good morning to them every time. They'd say hello back, and they were drinking the beers. And then at night, they would just put up the window, and it would be a kiosk, you know, and there would be a queue. And I thought, you know, the reason that nobody else is coming down onto the street, I don't really think they get how threatening they feel to other people.
Aye.
I don't genuinely think they intended that, but I mean, one of them was born on this street and had been living on his entire life here. So I just said to them, look, I'm going to hold a street party and I'm going to produce it, and I'm going to get Govan Housing Association to pay for it. So it was like a band that we set up a wee awning at the end of the street, and I booked some bands. Right. And then it was a t-shirt printing thing. Then Plantation Productions at the corner, who do lots of community art stuff, brought in a face painter for the kids. And I got the Glasgow museums. They've got mobile museums called Open Museum, where they turn up with a box and it's got artifacts in it. Right. That, you know, you can take it anywhere, and you open it up and you say, what do you think that is? And there's a discussion about
like an ice cream van for fucking artifacts, basically.
Basically.
You can't fucking eat it.
Exactly. So, does Madam want to go there now? Okay.
I think she wants painted like one of your friends.
Oh, absolutely, doesn't she just? So, we did all that, and it was great fun. And it was like rain, sleet, sunshine, rain, sleet, sunshine for the whole afternoon. But that was the Lewis Street party, and I just, you know, booked everything myself, got the Govan Housing Association to deal with the bills, and then after that, they were no longer sitting in front of they just kind of they kind of moved their business into the close of the flats. Again, I don't think there was any what would you call it, animus, any intent to terrorise. It was just that folk just came down onto the street for the first time and said hello, and the kids started playing for the first time ever. And we got Fiona Fleming, who's the local artist who does the airspace, that's her studio around the corner, to draw chalk pictures on the street and to do street games like hopscotch and all this kind of stuff. And it was just a time for folk to just see each other physically rather than to avoid each other, because there was that feeling I got from the street that there was a lot of passive aggression built up over a long time.
Aye, a lot of resentment.
And so I said to Govan Housing Association, the first one worked. It happened. And I thought, right, good, out of the way with that. And I told Govan Housing Association, if you think this is a good idea, then you carry on with it, and I'll step back and just let you get on with it, however you see fit. And that's kind of, they changed it to the Lewis Street Festival. But I mean, I think because this year is the 50th anniversary of Govan Housing Association, there'll be more stuff like that popping up around as their kind of celebration. I don't know what the plans are at all, but a street party, the thing about the layout of Lewis Street, it's, if you see the plan, it's exactly 50 feet across. In 1901, it would be perfect for a horse and cart. And that's about it.
Oh, really? Aye. When you say it like that, aye, right enough, man. It's fucking tight as fuck, man. It's a weird street. I've never really seen a street like this in my life.
Well, I mean, it took me 3 months for the penny to drop that this street has no pavement.
They're fucking right, hasn't he got a pavement?
No, you just walk out the door and you're onto the road.
Aye, right
I've
enough,
never
aye.
in my life come across a street with no pavement.
Right enough, because it's got something kind of, it's fucking, when you call it a pavement, I think it fuck knows what the fuck it's meant to be. Some sort of, that is weird, I wouldn't know how to describe that.
I wouldn't know what to do with it either. I mean, it was just, whatever, it had been bought by the Housing Association probably back in 1971 when they founded the thing, so, and it's just evolved over the time with the speed bumps and so on and so forth. But it is a strange block, the whole street. I mean, I feel sorry for Lewis Street, but even worse for Terenzi, which is behind us, where they just look out onto a brick wall from the shipyard.
I know.
That's their view.
No, it's a cunt view, innit?
It's like, that is brutal.
It's like Terenzi, I feel it, it's the Terenzi, I don't know why it was built, but I've got a feeling it was built for the sex offenders. I don't know, because it feels as if that's the kind of place you put somebody.
Put them, okay.
You put them, I mean, because you're facing a brick wall, you're stuck to the road, nobody's seeing you, nobody's seeing for you, you're only in that street. Not with this street, you could at least pass through it. You'd have maybe a wee reason to pass through it. Terenzi, there's no way you're in that street unless you're gone there. I've only been there once because some cunt stayed there and it was for a fucking house party. And get mad with it, and it was one of the streets you're like, I feel a bit out of the road here. It's one of the ones, not mean, feel as if you were getting stashed. But hang with, what is it inspired? Obviously, you stayed in Germany before you stayed in Govan, didn't you?
Yes.
How long did you stay in Germany for?
15 years.
15 years, aye.
And it was Cologne.
Cologne, oh, that's where you stayed in Cologne?
Yep.
What inspired you to move to Germany?
It was the time of my life when I wanted to get out of Scotland. That's simple.
Well, that's a fucking strange thought. Never had that.
So I mean, when I was in my early 30s, I thought I'd taken my musical activities as far as I could go at that time. I thought, I don't have a second language, that was embarrassing, and I wanted to also recontextualise my entire life, and just literally I was walking on the Eurostar with 2 suitcases. And I booked a B&B in Cologne, and that was it.
Which you just jumped ship,
yes.
just fucked off. But
back in the day when you could. Literally.
The good old days.
The good old days when all I had to do as an EU citizen was turn up to the Einwohnermeldungsamt, which is where you register where you live in Germany, with your passport, your British EU passport, and say, I now live here. Deal with it. So. And they did, and I spent 15 years there, and I really wanted to just meet new people, learn new things, learn a second language, and just the thing about it is I really immediately noticed when I first moved to Germany that I had been growing up with this island mentality. Because once you get off the island of Great Britain, you realise that your head is kind of trapped and shaped by the shape of the island, and everything else is other than the island. And so I really decided to grow my awareness of other cultures, because I was already a big fan of European culture. Being a classical musician, most of the music comes from there. So it's France, Italy, Germany, etc. And so it was really cool, because Cologne isn't just a very cool city in itself. It's a phenomenal transport hub for the whole of Europe. So I could get on a train, and in 4 hours I'd be in Paris. Or I'd take 2 hours up to Brussels. And I'd go along to the local airport, and in 1 hour, in any direction, I'd be in any European city. And that was great.
That's brilliant, man, innit, man? It fucking puts Govan to shame, not I mean, you're straight to the SBT link, it'll take you fucking the Tune and fucking George's Cross, that's it, man. Basically. Paris and Spain. Can't beat it.
Yeah, but the cultural life in Germany is phenomenal as well, because I mean, Cologne is on the Rhine, and so basically you've got all these towns that were historically built on the Rhine, like Essen, Dortmund, Dusseldorf, Cologne. They're all going down the Rhine. And basically anybody who wants to do a tour and make easy money starts at the top of the Rhine and just tours. This is like 45 minutes in the bus between each stop down the Rhine, because each town has its own concert hall, its own orchestra, its own opera house, tons of phenomenal stadia, and mega super infrastructure for culture. So regularly you would just get phenomenal acts going down the Rhine, jumping from one town to the next, orchestras, soloists, bands, anything you could think of. And because it's right in the middle of Europe, it wouldn't cost them very much to physically get there. They would just bus it or train it. The Berlin Philharmonic would just get on the train and take the train to Cologne. Whereas here, if you try to get any big act from the middle of Europe, it now, especially with Brexit and all the new tariffs, but even back then, it's a huge job to export and to cost landing something in Scotland. It's just a big operation to do, and vice versa. Any Scottish band trying to sell itself on the continent, you've got to be a really seriously well-known quantity for anybody in Germany to take an interest in you, because it will cost them more to get you there.
100%, man.
I mean, I was talking to an agent who deals in Scottish bands, and she was saying, 58% of my business was in Europe.
Oh, really? Aye.
And because it's just like, they get booked all the time, particularly Germany is totally nuts about Scottish bands and Scottish stuff. So, I worked last year with Noddy McIver, who's the lead singer of Skippinish,
right?
And he did our album Songs of Govan Old, which is a heritage album that we did together. And he was just, handed his instructions. He and the band would turn up to the airport, get on a plane, not really knowing where the hell they were actually going, but they would just turn up, get picked up at the other airport, turn up to a stadium, play, and then reverse the whole thing and go back home again.
Sake, man.
And it was
a mystery tour.
Oh, totally. But the logistics are so well worked out, and now because of Brexit, they are so much more difficult.
They fucked us with Brexit, man. Definitely, man. It's really right now. Because it's a lot of cunts are just thinking about, let's get out of COVID. Let's get out of coronavirus like that, mate. As soon as we're out of this, we've got Brexit to deal with, man. The UK's fucked, we're fucked, everybody else is alright. As soon as you get out of COVID, we need to deal with all this shit, man.
I know, I mean, if you wanted to do an act, in say Spain, for example, Spain is one of the places where a British musician can actually perform right now. So you've got to actually send your passport and buy a visa from the Spanish embassy in London. That takes 6 weeks, so you can't use your passport for anything else, and you pay up front for that, if they'll give you a visa. Then there's a carnet, which is any instruments or equipment you take on a van to back your act up. Classical musicians, if you have a violin maybe, you can take that on board with you into the cabin, and that doesn't need a carnet. A carnet is an instrument passport.
Oh, really, aye?
Yeah.
But is this just due to Brexit? Have you always needed this?
Britain didn't need it when it was in the EU.
Right.
And now, because we're out of the EU, we're expected to buy carnets. So any band with a gigantic rig or anything that needs to go in a van or on a boat or in a lorry across to the continent, each item has to have its own instrument or equipment passport. And the reason for that is, this is worldwide, so if you were to tour in America, you'd have to do the same thing.
Right.
You need a carnet for your equipment so that the customs can show that the equipment you brought into their country is exactly the same equipment that you take back out, and it wasn't sold on the black market while it was there without VAT and tax.
I see. Aye, they always need to get their fucking tax dollars
or
something, don't they, man?
They do. So it's a way of guaranteeing that which comes into the country is exactly that which leaves the country.
Basically a way of guaranteeing they're going to make some money out of it anyway.
Yep. So the carnets cost 100 or 200 quid per item.
Fucking really, aye?
Yep.
And does it matter on the kind of item, or is it just a carnet is just 100 or 200 quid, is it?
It matters. The rule is, if you can take it in the cabin with you, you don't need a carnet.
Right.
But if there's any other mode of transport, like a roadie van, then that will need its own carnet. And then there's now rules whereby you can only tour in 2 or 3 different places in Europe before going back. So you can't, for example, start in Germany If you had a tour in Germany, previously you'd be able to book in maybe Brussels
Right.
or Paris or whatever else. You can't do that anymore because each individual country now imposes different visa restrictions on the artists. So you'll need a German visa, then you'll need a French visa to go to France. So in other words, even though you're on the continent, you don't have freedom of movement to tour.
You can only just date in the country you've got the visa for.
Correct. And every country has different regulations.
Because I seen there was a petition going about, it was for artists, basically get travel, an artist visa kind of thing, so you could travel freely, but
It's not going to happen.
I can't see it happening, no, I mean, it's the fucked us are not going to exactly like that, we fucked you, but here, there you go, man, that'll help you out, no,
I mean, there's loads of, shall we say, confusion about when this was put on the table and whose fault it was that this never happened. Of course, both the EU and the UK government are saying it's the other's fault, but the bottom line is nobody cared enough. Nobody cared enough to sort this out before the Brexit.
I think they misled the nation, mate, definitely, man, because it's like one of the ones, it was all the kind of small print shit, but I think what they try to appeal it, it's like the same shit you happen with this media in this country, it's pure bias as fuck. They blame it on the immigrants. That's what they do. They blame it on the immigrants and they get all these daft cunts to believe what they read in the paper, then they go, oh fucking I'll vote these cunts out. Then all they've done is they've voted for Britain to leave the EU, but see all your mainly immigrants are coming from Pakistan. That Pakistan's on the EU, so you've not stopped any cunt from Pakistan coming here, so you've not done fuck all like that, know what I mean?
Yep.
And it's just, you ever watched, there was a documentary on Netflix, I forgot the name, it was about this company called Cambridge Analytica.
Yes.
And basically, but yeah, you're aware of it, it's like
There's the one that showed, it was Benedict Cumberbatch playing Dominic Cummings.
Oh, was it? I think this was a documentary,
Was it a
so I don't know if
documentary?
that may have been a film of it.
Okay.
But basically this company, they're like a social media kind of company they hired, basically, they were hired for the Brexit campaign and the Donald Trump campaign, so
Right.
they're both very successful. And the idea of what they done, they would like target people that weren't like undecided voters on like social media, so you'd have like, and then they'd start sending them like targeted ads and targeted videos. So say for like say your Donald Trump campaign, obviously they would start like showing up, like seeing people that were undecided voters. They would start showing up in their like news feeds, like stuff about Mexican immigrants, all this kind of bad shit, just to basically sway them out of Donald Trump's side. So they worked on Brexit and they worked like for Brexit for the Brexit. And then they worked on Donald Trump, and obviously they both got the votes for them to go through, you know what I mean? So they basically, it's fucking manipulated it, and the thing is as well, a lot of people are fucking stupid, they're dumb as fuck, there's no ifs, ands or two eyes about it, and especially when they see in social media, after see it in a paper, it must be true. Unfortunately that's not the case. That's the thing about the internet, no, I mean, I think right now we're in a golden age, with internet, no, I mean, see before, like 30 years ago, 40 years ago, with what you see in the paper was fact. You seen it was in the paper, oh it's in the paper, it must be true. Now I think we're in a great awakening stage, you know what I mean? We're starting to, this generation especially, probably like your generation, but the older generation, they still believe in government, but that's dying out I think, man, with the rise of the internet, there's too much information out there.
Yeah, and I mean, how do you filter it? How do you actually decide what's right and what's wrong?
That's what we're at a point now. I think seeing about 20 years time, I think there's going to be restrictions on it. There's going to need to impose something, there's no way, the internet's got free rein now. So I think we're going to see a change in that. But the thing is as well, you see a lot of fake information getting like purposely put out there to mislead people. So you've got a lot of stuff, this is the truth, and you get like the fake shit to kind of try and dispel the truth, to kind of like make people think, oh, this is bullshit. You know what I mean? It's a mad time we're living in.
Yeah, but do you think that with social media, it's a very difficult thing. I mean, do you think that social media should actually be curbed?
But in terms of like, regulations and restrictions kind of thing?
Yeah, in terms of, you know, the question of free speech, of what you can put out there. I know all the social media platforms now have monitoring systems, but it always seems to be the damage has been done before they decide to react and put the system in. You know, the spreading of false information about vaccines, for example, that's something that Facebook's going down hard on right now. I think it's a very complex topic because unless you can find journalists, I think journalists are one of the principal issues here, unless you can find journalists who you absolutely trust to analyse whatever the facts. You know, if you take the centre-left and the centre-right papers, they are still pretty much obliged, generally speaking, to take the same facts and publish them, and then to have an opinion about them. Anything outside of that gets really dodgy, but there's still a centre in journalism that's supposed to have a core of integrity to it, where the people actually basically report the actual facts. And then you can just decide what you think about that yourself. And they can steer you in one direction or another. So if you read The Guardian, you know you're going to be steered left. And if you read The Telegraph, you know you're going to be steered right. But that's your choice. But the facts, the core issues about what's actually going on have to be pretty much the same all over.
I don't think that's really what happens now, but is it? Because I believe the papers, the media controls public opinion. Is he back, mate? She obviously must be a journalist or something like that.
Probably.
But I know, I do believe the media controls public opinion, because you look at a lot of stuff that's happening in the world now, and what's the papers talk about? Fucking Harry and Meghan leaving the royal family. It's like saying, the biggest scandal in the royal history, then it's fucking, but Prince Andrew was a pedo, know what I mean? Is that not a bit very a scandal? It's like, know what I mean? And it's like, it's crazy. It's like, I don't think the papers really do their job, and you get there's a lot of right wing papers that are heavy, like fucking Tory donors and shit like that, know what I mean? It's like they're wanting the public to think a certain way, know what I mean? As you say, it should be that core integrity, but I think that's missing, know what I mean? I think it's a bias right now, know what I mean? They're wanting, as I say, try to sway the public opinion in one direction, whereas missing out the actual real facts that maybe a real newspaper should actually be revealing, know what I mean? That's where the internet's coming in, we're finding out. Imagine the internet wasn't here, thinking about the stuff that's came out. Let's say, we go back to the Jeffrey Epstein stuff and all that kind of stuff, but do you think if half of that would even come out the way it was if it wasn't for the internet, know what I mean? I think the internet's got a big responsibility in that kind of stuff.
Absolutely, yeah, and I think the complexity of the world now, the amount, not just the amount of data, but the fact that there are very few people who actually have an idea how the whole world works. The financial system is a really good example of something which is now so complex that you can't really find anybody who can explain to you what's actually going on. The systems are now so intermeshed and so gigantic. I mean, I have no idea who we're borrowing trillions of pounds from right now.
No.
And who are they borrowing trillions of pounds from?
Who's got trillions of pounds anyway? They're good for a fucking tap in the sounds of it, aren't they?
So, I mean, there's so much complexity that I understand why people would just want to give up on it and say, please can we just have simple, block, chunky answers and nice polarised debates which don't have any shading and complexity and nuance in them, and everything nice and, A, B, black,
nice
white.
and ABC.
I understand why that's an impulse, but at the same time it doesn't actually solve the problem that there's a lot of us on the planet and that we're creating massive amounts of complexity just by living the lives that we do.
100%, and right now I think there's more divide than ever amongst humans. Because before it was race and stuff, you had your race divide, now it's starting to get gender. And it's like there's so many more divides, and it's people are getting put into so many subcategories. It's like as if it's just we're all just getting alienated from each other, and it is getting quite mental with a lot of stuff. Fair dues, it's like a lot of people prefer to be identified a certain way and that, but there's it is a tribal thing, know what I mean? It is, and it's you can understand a lot of stuff. You get the gender inequality stuff and all that kind of stuff, but it's just true, know what I mean? To a degree, know what I mean? It's like about 50 years ago. Like there was the idea the guy goes out and works and the mother rears the wains, she's the housewife, know what I mean? Now it's actually like women get a career and kind of stuff, but in the workplace are they getting treated the same? But then people, it's starting to get to a point, right, there's not enough women in the workplace and all that stuff. On this workplace there's 2 men, there's 5 women, or there's 5 women and 2 men, know what I mean? It's like, and it's getting fucking complicated, man. It's getting to a point, it's now, and it's never ending. It's like, I was just reading an article before you come up there, it's Joe Rogan, like the woke mob, they're getting to a point. He says that he's like, it's got to get to a point that straight white men can't talk. But it's just kind of true to a degree, you know what I mean? Because I feel as if it's a rise of fucking bully culture in some people. I'm not saying they've no got like kind of legality in what they're doing, but I think there's a lot of people just love something to be annoyed at. They love to be see their life, they're going through life, they're doing a shite job, or they've got something not going right, they're getting shafted one way, but it's easy to look at something on the internet and be like, that's what's making me, I want to be angry at that, I can channel my energy into that.
Yeah.
Know what I mean? And I think that's what makes up a large portion of it, know what I mean?
I mean, one of the questions about anything which we call woke now is how contrived it looks.
Aye.
It looks contrived because it is contrived, because it's something new and something very complicated that people would rather not get their heads around. I mean, there was a venue I was talking to the other day, which I won't name because that's fair to them, where they were talking about their usual clientele. It's a venue in Govan, and they were talking about other groups who were minorities coming in to use their venue.
Right.
And they've got this balancing act between the old crowd, who's been there forever, who are really their bread and butter, and then people who they want to be open to, and who want to come in and use their event and function rooms for their own things, and that would kind of freak the old crowd out, and so on and so forth. So, they're trying to remain open to new people and open to new things, but at the same time, they're not wanting to scare away their core base.
Sounds like they've got quite a task on their hands, but it sounds,
especially in government. I mean, the whole issue of gender is a complicated one. I think that in the classical music business, where we are very, very, very traditional, and only now are we seeing the rise of women as conductors. I mean, for goodness sake, it's about holding a stick. There's nothing really, it's not a gender thing to hold a stick, and it's about leadership. And if the person on the podium can lead, and if they're musical enough and they can deal with this incredibly sophisticated and elite group of people in front of them who are all playing their violins and whatever else, and are expecting leadership and direction immediately, and are expecting the person on the podium to be a better musician than them, I know it's pretty high up. But one of the issues about bringing women into the conducting profession is that inevitably you're going to have a lot of women without very much experience, because it's a new thing, and they need to gain experience, whereas the male culture has been going on for forever and ever and ever, and there's been a pipeline of guys learning how to conduct for not centuries, but for about 150 years, I would say. But always being the leader of the ensemble. And now we're entering the 21st century, where more and more women are taking leadership arts roles, and why shouldn't they, for goodness sake? It's not like they have to build scaffolding, although I'm sure they could do that as well. It's a different energy, it's a different thing, and it's about changing the infrastructure of the business, so that even though a whole pile of women entering the business may not be great world-class conductors, that's true of most men as well. It's about getting them in so that there's more balance of decision making about who gets to be in the business in the first place. And then eventually, after a while, the real top flyers, the real geniuses, the real maestros will float to the surface anyway, regardless of what gender they are. But at the beginning of this whole process, you had a number of really big name conductors, who I won't mention, who vocally were anti-women on the podium, saying that women can't conduct. And I felt very much like that's, you've got to actually get them into the system and get them trained up, and you've got to get them confident enough to do that. And now we definitely have a strong batch of female conductors all over the world who have that, but there are going to be more and more and more. But there's always that moment where it just feels utterly contrived, where it just feels countercultural to have something like this happening, or something like this person doing this job. And ultimately, the question is, are you going to be one of those people who just push through that and allow that to happen and open that space up, and not feel threatened by another batch of people who could actually end up being better than you? Which is it's true of all ethnic minorities, true of all gender minorities, sexualities, women, and so on and so forth. That if the talent pool is bigger, then there's going to be less for everybody all round.
The thing is, as well, as if the pool is bigger, you're going to get more talented people. Whereas if it was just male conductors all the way, then you're going to think of the size of the world, the amount of female conductors that come that could be creative geniuses, but they're just not getting their day because they're no male. Know what I mean? So as the music is suffering at the end of the day, but it's a pure prehistoric fucking mindset. Cunts have got, and obviously, as you say, it's like predominant. It's been 150 years of just kind of male conductors. A lot of people grow up with that, and they believe in it. Know what I mean? They believe in it. It's something to believe in, and then try to leave that belief. It's hard for some people. Know what I mean? It's insane.
And the thing is, it builds into people's minds from a very early age. Remember there was one performance of Purcell's Dido and Aeneas in London, and they got Wayne Marshall, who's a black conductor, to conduct it. And it was a kids' performance, so it was kids from the schemes going along to a theatre to see a 16th century English opera conducted by a black conductor. And even the black kids in the audience couldn't compute that the conductor was black.
Really? Aye.
Because, I mean, all the information about what your culture is made up of gets to you one way or another at a very, very early age. And I know that the research that I've read suggests that by the age of 7, your cultural cake is baked. You've already got a whole range of preconceptions about how your world is supposed to look and who's in charge of it and all the rest of it. So then you've really got to, be on an exponential learning curve upwards to try and keep up with retraining yourself. And I mean, inevitably, the old guys in a pub or a club or wherever who at the end of their lives just don't want to relearn anything.
Aye.
Fair enough, okay, if that's the way they are, then that's the way they are. But from my point of view, it's always been about increasing the talent base of any business, of any industry, to get the best people to do the job. And that's how a good commercial culture works. If you basically remove or cut off the opportunity of an entire section of population for a job that frankly anybody should be able to do, who's got a brain in their heads and the ability to do it, then you're reducing the ability of that industry to grow. I think one of the things about diversity in industries is that it's a very complicated subject, but if you get a whole pile of people who obviously think differently and feel differently from everybody else, all putting all their creative ideas into one big melting pot, you could end up with a big punch-up. Oh. You could end up with massive disagreements and massive dysfunctionality, but generally speaking, you'll probably end up with a better creative result at the end of it than if you just had a bunch of white guys in a room.
I know.
Or a bunch of white women in a room, or whatever. But monocultural or mono whatever usually produces a safer result, but it doesn't produce a more innovative result to stay ahead of the game. And that's the thing that interests me more. You could argue that, particularly in business or any form of creative pursuit, what you're looking for is diversity of thinking and feeling. So that can be anybody. That could be you and me. Even though we're both white men, you may think differently from me, so you and I could be in a team that come up with a cool thing together because we just think differently, because we are different people at the end of the story,
that's
regardless of what we look like.
Backgrounds, different cultures,
Exactly.
Almost grew up in different times, different, know what I mean? It's like, there's like both white Scottish men, but you know what I mean? Parts of Scotland, it's like worlds apart from each other.
That's right. But I mean, the easiest way to get diversity of feeling and thinking and input creatively is to just get a whole pile of people together who aren't obviously the same. I mean, I think between me and you there's a class difference.
Nah, 100%.
And that's absolutely fine, because I mean, I think it's just another energy exchange to work with if we allow it to work. Whereby, for example, if I work with Sonny G's Steg down the road and his rappers like CCTV, who are based here in Government, Empress, Freestyle Master and Solar Eye, they're the ones I know because they're the ones I've worked with. I mean, that journey of me as a classical conductor working with Scottish rappers was a very long one indeed. And it started in the African Arts Centre next to Ibrox Stadium.
I know exactly where you are.
Yep. It's been ripped down now, but and turned into a tyre place, whatever.
It fits in with the rest of them.
Yes, it does. But back when Chief Ammo was running it, I went to him and said, I want to do a gig where there's a string orchestra, a professional string orchestra, and you and your pals on African drumming and Scottish rappers all on the same stage. And I came up with the stunningly innovative title, Strings, Drums and Rap.
Love it, genius.
And I know, it did what it said on the tin. The rappers were CCTV, who are brilliant. You should get them in to talk sometime.
I've heard them before. I've seen them done that short music video doing the dogs. That's the first time I heard them, but somebody else recommended them. I definitely need to get in touch with them.
They're very talented. So they turned up, and I remember the first time my string players, who are all, they've gone to conservatoires and they're all from European major cities, and they're sitting in the African Arts Centre tuning up and whatever else, and CCTV, Jamie and Johnny, were just literally pinned against the opposite wall, looking at us, saying, what the
what's going on here?
How are we going to work with this? I mean, I didn't know how it was going to work, but we just eventually sorted
That's the beauty
out.
of it, man, the risk.
Yes, you're absolutely right, and this is where an awful lot of you've pressed one of my buttons with risk. You absolutely have to learn how to take risks.
Oh, no, life is built on taking risks, man. I've preached it all the time, man. As I say, I chucked my job last week, quit it just to do this. I was like, right now, I've not got any set source income and anything like that, but I was like, fuck it, man, that's the way it's going to happen. Know what I mean? Look at every great story, it started with a risk, know what I mean?
Yes, that's true.
Know what I mean? I just love the mystery of it, the excitement of it, just you don't know where it's going to go, that's the beauty of it. Know what I mean? It's like, I could no take risk. Even the same with Matt. Matt had offered a job promotion. It was either a job promotion or go away for 6 months travelling and be like, fuck the promotion, you know what I mean? Go travelling, because you'd just be sitting the rest of your life thinking, what if? Then when he says fuck it, he'd be like, go do the 6 months travelling. They end up offering him a promotion when he gets back. A wage rise. So not when it paid off that one, but definitely sometimes they pay off, sometimes they don't. That's the beauty of it. It's the mystery of life.
That's the whole point of a risk. I mean, you're going to be faced with the possibility of a failure, but that's just what you have to accept if you're going to take the possibility of a better payoff.
That's it, man. It's a gamble.
It is.
That's it. It's like being in a casino, man. You're not always going to win, but it's the.
And I mean, I think most of my life, my adult life anyway, has been a bunch of very, like walking on the train and going to Germany, not knowing, no job, no contacts, no nothing, off we go, just start from zero again and just reinvent life from scratch. I think one of the things that I think is one of my pain points about Scottish culture is that folk really aren't that practiced at risk taking.
Nah, too negative, too much of a negative mindset in fucking Scotland especially, man.
Stuck in the ways, I think, a lot of Scottish people.
Because the minute you do it, man, it's like in Scotland, it's just everybody's just been fucking shites in each other, man. So it's like, the way I see it, it's like, think of the amount of people that are on this planet. See, there's 6 billion people on this planet, maybe more or less, fuck knows, last time I checked. See, like, how many of the people do you think actually believe in themselves and take risks? That's a very, very small percentage out of the full lot. Imagine everybody had the same mindset, like, not maybe the same mindset, but the same fuck it, take risks, believe in yourself. Imagine fucking how the world would be if the full planet, even half the planet, folk like that, you know what I mean? How different a place would be, how brilliant it would be, you know what I mean? It'd be amazing.
It would definitely be a much more different place than the place it is now.
Aye.
I mean, obviously in a time of COVID, we got to change the way we think about risk, but at the same time, I would love to be able to, just what I love with Govan is the ability to bring all sorts of people together who wouldn't under any other circumstance touch each other with a barge pole and see what happens and do stuff and not care too much if it doesn't sound brilliant or if it doesn't work out well or if it just stops. I mean, one of my most ill-fated projects was the Govan Men's Samba Band.
The Govan Men's Samba Band?
Yes, let's not talk too much about that, but it survived about 2 months and I got a professional tutor in and I bought a samba kit from Brazil and had it imported to Govan and we rehearsed with a professional tutor, there were about 10 of us, and then after 2 months the idea was I would hire a bus and we would all pile onto a bus and we would terrorise Govan with our samba thing. And what I did is I decided to invent the Govan Men's Samba Band dress code, which was one of those visibility jackets.
Right.
With Govan Men's Samba Band on the back of it, done in the Brazilian colours of red, yellow and green.
Fuck's sake.
And with red, yellow and green hearts. and once we'd finished with Govan, and I think Lidl was the best one, because the people were at the tills doing their shopping, and they would see us beating the hell out of us.
Oh, so did you just turn up at random places, or like Lidl? I thought you meant like fucking venues or something like that.
No. We started off terrorising Govan Cross Shopping Centre, and people just bewilderedly walked past us. Then we went to Lidl, then we went up to the West End and parachuted ourselves in front of Waitrose. And then we did the gates of the Botanic Gardens, and then we went back, we did the in front of the Transport Museum, and they're very sensitive about using the Transport Museum as a place where unplanned things happen.
Oh,
so
out Brazilian YMCA,
yes, out came
with the fucking hard hats and high vis vests.
So out they came to check up, and I said, "Don't worry, our bus is coming. We'll be moving on in 5 minutes." And then we went down to Argyle Street, went down to Jamaica Street, and we stood in front of St Enoch, beating the hell out of stuff in a semi-reasonable way. And it wasn't great stuff. After 2 months, a bunch of old guys who'd never played samba before in their lives, and we just did that. And then it kind of fizzled out, because I don't think they really had that much motivation to carry on. But I mean, there's an awful lot of, in my projects, and I'm seeing a lot of organisations as they come back into recovery now in Govan are doing the suck it and see thing, whereby nobody really knows what's going to work. Nobody really knows what's feasible and how the restrictions are going to let us do X, Y and Z. I'd love to do an outdoor gig at some point over the summer, but I don't yet know how that's going to be pulled off.
That's fucking hard to make plans for it, man. You're getting opened, the golden carrot's getting dangled, and it's getting shut again, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's one of us, you can't even plan, you can't even book somewhere, but it's before. It's crazy. I was seeing this the other day, So all the shit we used to moan about were pure taken for granted. So you go to the pub, so why couldn't days go to the pub? And they were like, I fucking wish I could go to the pub. Insane. But as it's made you get, I've seen a lot of benefits of lockdowns. You're talking about obviously people get that suck it and see attitude. I stopped playing the guitar for ages, just fell away from it. And when lockdown happened, obviously I was furloughed. And I remember seeing a quote somewhere going like that, this can either be the making of you or the breaking of you, like make it fucking work for you. Just went like that, fuck it, just started playing the guitar again. And uploading a video to Facebook and just started doing that. Now fucking doing podcasts and everything else off it back, or just for fucking picking up that guitar again, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I've got a lot of benefit of lockdown, I'd say.
Good.
Obviously I'm lucky to say that, know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think sitting here in Govan, I know just how awful it's been. I know the people who've committed suicide. I know the people who've OD'd. I know the people who've lost their homes, fallen off the edge mentally because their whole rug's been pulled out from underneath them. And you have an awful lot of folk with not an awful lot of resilience built into their lives for whatever reason. It could be to do with addiction. It's probably to do with adverse childhood experience syndrome and all that smorgasbord, that gigantic package. But yeah, I mean, the people who've done well out of this are the people, I think, who have intrinsic resilience built into them and who have enough resilience to get through this. But when a place like Govan, and I imagine a lot of other places of deprivation are very similar around the world, start looking at how they're going to get themselves back, I think one of the things we desperately need to be able to do is allow people to meet up and like normal again. Because first of all, there's so much internet poverty here. People have not been, jumping on board a Zoom call to do an aerobics class, left, right and centre. That just hasn't been happening here because people don't have the data. They can't afford it. They may have the devices. They may have the smartphones. Loads of tablets have been given out for free. But it's still a difficult thing for a lot of people to make that leap.
Wi-Fi costs money.
Wi-Fi costs a lot of money. A lot of free Wi-Fi is being given out here in Govan. In Govan Housing Association, Clyde College and so on. They've given out loads of tablets where you can put an actual data chip in the side. And
so almost like a SIM card kind of idea, like
exactly.
Same you can just use the data for that. Oh,
yeah.
I see, I didn't know. I knew housing had gied away the tablets, I didn't know they gied it with the data chip.
Yeah, with the data chip, and then the housing or whoever else can reload the data chip remotely. I do that with one of my groups of musicians in exile. They're the asylum seeking musicians, so I give them tablets. I can mail order them Vodafone MiFi and send it to their house, and they've got that. And when it runs out, they text me, and I will top it up for them, so we can carry on working online together.
Right, brilliant.
And that is brilliant because it means that they don't just carry on playing music with other people in the group online, or doing our wee Zoom calls and wee videos and stuff like that. But it also means that they've got access to the internet for other things that are actually a bit more important.
I can keep in contact with family back home, kind of stuff like that.
That's right. So I mean, there's a huge collection of issues to be unpacked, but it still doesn't actually solve the problem that if you want to help somebody, and if somebody actually needs and wants help, then especially in areas like this, it's got to be one-to-one. It's got to be face-to-face. It's got to be intensive care. Because you can't just digitalize that kind of service, that kind of interaction between two people and how they're needed. I mean, it was interesting. Maybe you can a bit. Steg down at Sunny G had just completed one of the projects that I was doing with the artist in residence for Govan. This is a Glasgow Life thing called Recovery Rap, which is for people who are recovering from addiction. And we just worked with Turning Point, who are the charity who deal with people who are dealing with a lot of addiction issues, and said, is there anybody interested in free rap lessons, hip-hop lessons from Steg? And they put some people our way, and they enjoyed it. And Steg, and they worked online for 6 months, 5 months, and finally got them into the studio when it was safe to do so, and got them to actually record in a radio studio with all the backing, so that they could actually have a product at the end. That they're finished work of art. Exactly. And that's nice. That's very valuable. But it has to come to the point whereby the real human contact, not the Zoom contact. Zoom is almost like looking at somebody, but their soul isn't in their body.
It's like looking at a fucking picture talking to you, man. It's like a painting.
Yes.
It's like Harry Potter. It's like a few people say it does about. See, obviously doing Zoom podcasts, and there's something you can't carry. I'm not up for doing that shit. Talking to fucking a phone. You're talking to a screen. It's weird. You ever watched there's a DC and Arul Hawani, they're like two MMA kind of like pundits kind of thing, and they do like a podcast called DC and Hawani. It's basically its own YouTube.
Yeah.
And they're doing it on like Zoom or whatever else, and it's just they're two faces in a screen talking to you, basically. They're talking to each other, but it's even you're sitting, especially like I'm sitting stoned at my nut at night, it's like they're talking to me, and it kind of freaked us out a bit, but it's purely as that human, you need human interaction, man. It's fucking too digital. Well, so obviously it does work for people, see if you're in another country or that maybe, but no, for some kind it's 10 minutes down the fucking road to you, know what I mean? You can talk to them on a fucking tablet.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? I feel, see when I'm talking to people on FaceTime and that, I feel as if I just can't wait for the phone call to end. I'm just constantly like that, see something like that, because you're not sitting pure up and about like now. Don't know, I'm kind of revitalised talking to somebody, but you're on a fucking phone call, it's just not the same. It's fucking horrible, man.
Yep.
But how did you end up starting the Musicians in Exile?
So we're rewinding to that.
So was that started for the youth orchestra? Right, tell us about that, because I remember obviously you started that. Is that basically tied in together then?
Sort of. In my head it is, because in my strange, weird, neurodiverse head. So the National Youth Orchestra of Iraq was 2009 to 2014, and that was me going out to Iraq to work with classical musicians who were living in Iraq, who were between 16 and 30.
Right.
To do a youth orchestra, because nobody had ever done anything like that before, unsurprisingly, for a whole pile of reasons.
I need to have to take risks.
Exactly. So 2009 was a really interesting year because it was the tail end of the Iraq War. The war was still bubbling away, but it was technically calming down. It was when George Bush was just getting a bit bored of it.
Basically everything had been blown to fuck. There wasn't anything left to bomb.
There wasn't exactly. So it was kind of the rebuilding phase. And that was me going out to Iraq to work with young classical musicians in a national youth orchestra. So they were all from different towns: Baghdad, Suleimania, Kurdish, Arab, Sunni, Shia, Armenian. Baghdadi Armenians pretty strong. Also Assyrians. The whole smorgasbord. They didn't care who they were. They were just musicians making music, and that's the level we kept it at. But it was strange because even though it's one country, the Kurds could only speak Kurdish, most of them. Some of them could also speak Arabic, whereas the Arabs definitely couldn't speak Kurdish.
Right.
It's like Gaelic and English. Most people, except it's not, because most people who speak Gaelic also speak English.
Right.
But there were loads of Kurds who, as a matter of political defiance, chose not to learn Arabic. So I'd have a Kurdish translator on my left saying everything I said in Kurdish, and then an Arabic translator on my right saying everything in Arabic.
But simultaneously?
Not simultaneously. So in other words, rehearsals were really slow, because I would say something, and then they'd have to say it, then he'd have to say it, and then finally everybody fallen asleep waiting for the translation to end. So I got very good at saying very few things,
right,
so that the translation phase wouldn't take forever. But once we'd gotten over that hurdle, and the first couple of years, everybody was really suspicious of each other, because the Kurds and the Arabs, there was really bad blood.
A lot of tension.
A lot of tension. But because it's an orchestra, but because I was such a slave master, and basically hardwired them to doing nothing but music, morning, noon and night, for 2 solid weeks. So nobody had time to be sectarian, or whatever else they thought they would be. And by the time we got to the end and we were slowly starting to form the orchestra together, everybody was really excited, and we did a final push and did our first concert. And then that was the kind of thing where we thought, actually, that was so brilliant that they'd achieved something that under no other circumstances could ever happen anywhere in their country. That people from all these different groups would actually get together and produce something good. It just didn't happen.
It was usually at each other's throats.
Basically, in one way or another, especially politically, because the Iraqi government had just started, building itself up. It had been founded in 2006. It was a bit of a disaster, and everybody was at each other's throats. So that went on and on for we did the first year in Suleimania, which is the Kurdish town in the north of Iraq. The second year in Erbil, still in Iraq. Am I getting this right? Year 3, we did 2 weeks in Erbil, then we flew out to Germany, to Bonn, to Beethoven Festival. We did 2 weeks there with the National Youth Orchestra of Germany, and that was like our first international thing. And we weren't ready for it, because you're talking about kids who had learnt how to play a violin or a clarinet or a flute by mimicking YouTube during a Middle Eastern war.
Fuck's sake, man.
And that's motivation for you.
100%.
because their teachers.
What's your excuse?
Yes, exactly. Very much so. So their teachers had either fled to Jordan, where anybody with enough money to do so would have done, or died in the war. So they were left during the Iraq War to either teach each other or themselves. And they were basically sitting at home, just practicing the violin, playing Bach, watching YouTube videos. And YouTube was still a very young game back then. So they were just trying to do whatever they could to mimic what they did in the West in the videos to try and learn classical music. And so by the time we got them and they physically met in 2009, they were massively, insanely, drivenly motivated. Because this had been the thing that had kept them sane and alive throughout the whole war. But they were also dealing with massive musical and technical problems because nobody was there to teach them, understandably. So we had this orchestra that wasn't really ready to hit the international stage. But I knew if we didn't get them out there soon, they would never get what they could become. And so Beethoven Fest in Bonn was a whole month of rehearsing one concert. So that, because we would be in front of the President of Germany and a whole pile of politicians, and the place was sold out. It was a massive cheering and a huge program, and media crawling all over us. And that was great because I needed them to feel wanted. I needed them to feel what it was like to be in a culture that actually wanted to listen to what they were doing.
Something felt as if it was something worthwhile for them.
Exactly. And then in the fourth year we came to Britain, and we did the Edinburgh Festival Fringe, and we did the Queen Elizabeth Hall down in London, and that was 3 weeks in Edinburgh with the Edinburgh Youth Orchestra. And then in the fifth year we did Aix-en-Provence in the Grand Théâtre de France, and that was with the National Youth Orchestra France. And that was the first time when I felt that we were starting to sound like a normal youth orchestra, because all the other years we were I was especially walking like on eggshells around multiple political agendas. Because it was the Baghdad government, then it was the Erbil government, both hating each other, then it was diplomats from Germany and Britain talking to them, trying to get them on board, not interested, where do we get the money to pay for this, etc, etc. There was loads of toing and froing behind my back, thank goodness I never had to do that. But once we got to year 5 and the diplomatic toing and froing had kind of worn off and nobody was interested anymore, we just were able to be normal and just turn up and be a bunch of kids making music and having a huge amount of fun. And Aix-en-Provence was terrific fun because we had the National Youth Orchestra of Italy and Spain and France all together with us in Aix-en-Provence rehearsing and performing.
Amazing, man.
And we were on one campus and others were dotted all over the place. So it was this gigantic, it was like a planetary alignment of national youth orchestras. And the national youth orchestras of France and Italy and so on, they are like Rolls Royces.
Oh, really?
They're totally, it's the best young players in the whole country come together to do a concert. And then they're going to one of the most, the poshest and most expensive towns in the south of France in this mega complex theatre that's just been built. Then along comes us. And we're still not really sounding like a glossy Rolls-Royce model. We're more like a Mini. And we're doing our best to try and get our standard up so that we can sound respectable against the other national youth orchestras. And we did, at the end of the day, sound respectable. But what mattered to me by that time, because I was so exhausted running that project, was what the kids are actually doing back home. Because it was like one summer course a year, and then a year's work just to prepare that one course of 2 weeks. So what were they doing back at home to make it worthwhile? So they would be starting their own wee orchestras and their string quartets, and they would start teaching other people. Kids' tots coming up. So one of our players, the principal, Flute Walid, he was cool. He was a professional footballer in Kirkuk at the age of 19, and one day he sat in front of the telly, and I don't know how this came about, but on came a piece by Bach, the Second Orchestral Suite, which is for flute and orchestra, and he was completely and utterly gobsmacked by the flute. He didn't know what to call it. He'd never seen one before.
What did they call it? Did they have a name for it?
Well,
he
actually just asked a pal. He said, "What is that I just heard?" And he said, "Well, that's actually called a flute."
Oh, it'd been brilliant if he made up his name for it, man. It'd been amazing just to hear it, what he could have called it.
Yeah.
Whistling tube.
A whistling tube, exactly.
Saying that, he'd probably be saying it. I'm saying that as a Scottish guy sitting in a house in Govan, I'd call it a whistling tube, know what I mean? His would probably be a bit more, I don't know, out there than mine.
Well, I had a flautist along at the Govan campus with St Saviour's and Riverside Primary to play the flute for the kids. This is primary 3, and they'd never come across a real flautist with a real flute before. And so all of that, it's like landing on the moon. It's like a totally new alien thing that happens. So while he bought himself a flute and taught himself, again, by downloading stuff off the internet, this finger goes there, this finger goes there, and all the rest of it, and teaching himself how to read music, and then nailed the audition, because it was all done on YouTube, the auditioning, because we couldn't physically go out and listen to people in Iraq, but we had to audition somehow. So everybody made videos in their bathrooms, in their kitchens, whatever else. We'd send out PDFs of the music they had to play, and they'd send it back, and we'd evaluate it and say, that's the orchestra this year. And he had to nail the audition every year, because Daniel, who I hired as his tutor, was a brilliant German flautist, but he had a Syrian dad and could speak Arabic.
Fuck's sake, man.
And that's great, because Walid, living in Kirkuk, could speak Kurdish and Arabic. Because Kirkuk's kind of like a melting pot town.
Oh, is it?
It's very multicultural. So he was one of the few people in the orchestra who could do both languages fluently. And so he was completely driven and motivated. He gave up his football career entirely and just spent all his time practicing the flute. So it's people like that who are absolutely amazing, who just went home then and formed their own orchestras and just did their own thing. And to hell with how good or bad it was something to just try and lift Iraq back up again. So the cool thing is, even though the whole thing stopped in 2014 because ISIS invaded, and that was game over, they literally cut the country in half, and we couldn't communicate, we couldn't reach each other anymore.
Oh, really?
So the entire country was completely ruined by the invasion of the Islamic State. And the kids were telling me that they were scared in Baghdad when the Islamic State reached Tikrit. It was the road from Mosul to Tikrit to Baghdad, and it was one straight road all the way down from the top of the country to the bottom, and there was Baghdad at the bottom, and they'd reached Tikrit, and Baghdad had basically just completely shut down. Nobody on the streets. They were just waiting to be invaded by the Islamic State.
Really, aye?
They didn't get there. It didn't happen, but it was an absolutely terrifying time for the players.
I could imagine,
Because
man.
they already completely destroyed Mosul. One of my players had to get out and managed to escape Mosul and go into the Kurdistan region of Iraq just before ISIS completely took over the area. So the whole thing was, after that there was no way of operating a National Youth Orchestra on any level.
100%, man.
So I just gave up on that and thought, right, okay, I'm going to write the book and just move on and purge myself of all of that, because there's nothing else I could do. I was on the floor, and that's when I decided to come back to Scotland. So when I came back to Scotland, ended up here in Govan. It was just a roof over the head to get on with life. Looked around and thought, actually, there's an awful lot going on that I could work with here. And one of the things I decided to do was Musicians in Exile, which is a project I did already in Cologne. It wasn't a pilot. It lasted 4 years, and the idea was very simple. That instead of me flying out to the Middle East and looking for classical musicians, I would look for Middle Eastern musicians here in Glasgow.
Right, I
So
see,
just
man.
swap them.
Defos, man. Find it on your doorstep.
Exactly, because and it turns out there were loads of really talented asylum seekers, mainly from Iran and from El Salvador. I don't know why the Home Office has ended up putting those two groups into Glasgow more than any other, but that's the way it's panned out. So we have.
Anybody from El Salvador?
Really?
Oh, there's
I know.
loads. There's loads.
Probably haven't known on.
They're all running away from the cartels,
Alright, right.
and then they end up in Govan.
Well, I see. They're Govan and end up with the Govan cartels, fuck's sake. Fuck's sake, end up Low Street, man. Couldn't set fire to the gas and all that shit, man. Punting for the window.
Yeah. So that's where Musicians in Exile started. It was basically putting calls out through the networks like Scottish Refugee Council, Govan Community Project, and all the other networks that deal with asylum seekers. Red Cross was great as well. And slowly and surely, folk came and started rehearsing every Tuesday night here in Govan. And if they didn't have an instrument, the key factor was, if they didn't have an instrument, I would buy them one. I had budget for that. I'd done some fundraising, and I would give this person an oud, which is a Middle Eastern lute, which is a fabulous instrument.
Oh, really?
Really gorgeous. Or if they wanted a guitar, or if they wanted an Iranian drum, I would mail order that from Turkey, and stuff like that. And whatever they needed, as long as the rule was, I'm going to put this into your hands and you just get on with it. I'm not going to tell you what to play. It's none of my business what your culture is. I just want you to be what you were back home, because you're carrying this around inside of you and nobody's letting you have it out. So it's really just a question of, I mean, there's the assimilation argument and there's the integration argument. Assimilation is saying you've all got to speak English and you've all got to be singing British pop music because you now live in Britain. And the integration argument is you're already musicians from Iran or Syria or wherever else, so just do what you did and we'll turn up and listen to it anyway.
That's it. It goes back to what I was saying earlier on about obviously go the white male conductors and that kind of shit, know what I mean? And when you branch out and get like other people for other kind of backgrounds, I mean, add to the pot, know what I mean? You get some fucking quite creative stuff.
Yeah.
And some stuff you wouldn't have heard before. I doubt there's many people out there listening to Iranian music, that kind of stuff, they wouldn't have heard it unless that kind of thing happened.
I know, I mean, we were rehearsing in 901 Govan Road, which is quite close to here, and it's a shop front.
Is it the Hub?
Yes.
That's Jerry Keogh.
Exactly.
We had Jerry in the podcast last week.
Exactly so. So we would rehearse there, and there'd be 905 and 901, the Iranian group and then the world group. And folk would walk by and just walk in and sit down and listen. I didn't stop them, as long as they weren't steaming, and as long as they weren't nasty.
Was that 10% of the population of Govan then? Fucking one of the mad what it's talking about?
Well, I mean, I had to kind of use my judgment as to how far I would take a certain individual coming in, but basically everybody was great. One of my neighbours saw, musicians excellent, give it while doing drums, and he just started dancing, an old guy, in front of the window, and somebody was taking out the phone and videoing this, of course. And then he would come in and he started swinging his hips around in front of the. I know, and it just.
Was it one of your old samba band, by any chance?
No, he wasn't.
Unfortunately.
He just went totally for it. And that ended up in the Evening Times as a viral.
Did it?
Yes. Somebody sent the video in, and it was just hilarious. It was just a very thin veil between people who lived in Govan and asylum seekers making music. Literally, a shop front window and an open door. But everybody treated us with respect, and everybody just let us do what we did. And they really liked it because something was happening, and that's all. Something happening was better than nothing happening at all, regardless of whether it was Iranian or Syrian or El Salvadorian. None of that really mattered.
There's a bit of life getting breathed into the community.
There's that as well, yes. So that's why Musicians in Exile happened, and that's still going, because we decided not to shut the group down when lockdown happened last year. We decided to keep on meeting on Tuesday nights and then creating these little multi-screen videos where we all record ourselves at home, and then compiling them into one music video. And that's how we're carrying on still doing this, because we're still not allowed to physically meet together yet.
Yeah, this is a bastard, man. So what is he doing it through Zoom kind of thing? Like an idea?
It's very difficult because Zoom, because of internet latency, you can't actually perform together as musicians. So what we do is we have a wee social meeting, a wee strategy meeting, and a planning meeting on Tuesday nights on Zoom, and then during the week everybody will, like Callum, one of the facilitators, will send a drum beat digitally to somebody, and they will put their guitar over that and record them. Then they'll pass that over to the singer.
So you piece it together like a big jigsaw.
And so each group can produce one song per month. And again, if they need tech, I will mail order them tech and send them out so that they can participate and just get on with it.
Brilliant, man.
And that's worked so far. We're one of the few asylum seeker groups that's actually kept going and stayed productive. It's very compromised. It's not ideal by a long shot, but we've just kept at it. And we now know how to do all that technical stuff. We're all very genned up on how to produce music online. So we've got the Scottish Refugee Council coming up, not the Scottish Refugee Festival, coming up in the third week of June, 14th to 20th. So we'll create a wee 15-minute film about, they're going to create a special song called Always on the Move.
Right.
That's their title, their song. I just let them get on with it.
I like it. It's quite relevant to their situation, I suppose.
That's exactly what they came up with. And the rest of the film is going to be a film of them being interviewed outside. And Paisley Arts Centre is our partner, so they're dealing with all the film production side of it.
Oh, brilliant, man.
I don't have to worry about that at all.
Aye.
I'm just making sure that the thing gets into the Scottish Refugee Festival and makes things happen.
So see the Scottish Refugee Festival, where does that get held?
Normally it would be held all over Glasgow.
So is that a travelling kind of thing?
It's a reflection of the Refugee Festival across the whole of Britain. So this is just the Scottish version of the festival that happens in Manchester. They choose that one week. This year it's 14th to 20th of June. So there'll be a festival going down in London and Manchester, Liverpool and wherever else. And then the Scottish one is in Glasgow. But that just means under normal circumstances we would do a gig.
Right.
Or people would have talks, cookery classes, all the rest of it around the whole city, because there's a number of integration networks all over Glasgow that get asylum seekers and refugees together to do their thing. So that would normally be a big, fabulous, messy fringe festival where you just submit your event and then you just get on with it. But in this particular one, it's all online, it's all digital. So we're making a film so that it's finished, and then it will just appear on the programme of the Scottish Refugee Festival, and people can just watch it wherever they want.
See, that's good, man. At least it's got a wee body of work, no? I mean, you can look back at it.
Yeah.
I mean, they can look back at it and they've actually got to look at it. I suppose if you've done a festival and played live, you know, we'll only get, unless somebody films that, we'll get that one live performance where you go to this, you can always get back to it in future, know what I mean? Or even if anybody else joins the group, you can go, well, this is what we've done before.
Yeah.
If you ever approach anybody like in the future, know what I mean? Maybe get funding or that kind of idea, then you've got to be something to show them. That kind of idea, so it could work in their favour, know what I mean? But where's the plans to take it then? So is it right now is just dealing with that at the Scottish Refugee Festival?
At the moment, yeah, because everything's baby steps. I mean, this is as far as we've ever planned. Like 2 months in advance, that's pretty adventurous.
That's when you just found yourself here like, oh fuck's sake,
I know. So it's where do we take it? We need to get back to physical face-to-face rehearsals. That'll probably be on Glasgow Green, because we did a trial of that last year, where we had to, it was me in my face mask, and I kid you not, a 2 metre tape measure, walking around, making sure that they would stay 2 metres apart on Glasgow Green. Totally. And then I had to, sanitize my hands with goop and get them to sign for their travel expenses, then wipe the pen down and start all over again.
Sake,
it was just mental. But I was the paranoid COVID marshal, That was my job, and the rest of them just sat in their wee clumps and made music. And it was great because, Glasgow Green, people were coming up to us, not right up to us, of course, but listening to live music for the first time in months.
Quite cultural, that area of the city. That's where our studio is, the bar is. It was right on Glasgow Green. It's weird. It's different for everywhere else, man. You meet someone with a characters down there, don't you, man? Guy took us picking magic mushrooms in Glasgow Green. You know what I mean? It's like you meet so many different characters and that kind of stuff. Yeah. Some good, some no as good. Some you'd probably best avoid, you know what I mean?
Yeah. You can have the art studio we've seen, and then you get the space, which is all the music in there.
The space, you ever heard of the space?
I did that.
I know the space. I'd looked at the space when I was doing Steg's first album that I'd commissioned The Air in Between. And my idea was to get him to write an album, because he does the digital backing tracks and then the rappers rap over the top of it, then that's the album finished.
Right.
So I commissioned him to write that. But my thing was I wanted to orchestrate the album for 10 musicians and conduct it live with the rappers rapping over the live band. And so it was like 2 flutes, 2 saxes, a cello, a violin, an accordion, a double bass, a bass guitar, an electric guitar, 2 pianos. And it was just, and Steg on the computer. All Steg actually had to do was watch me going 1, 2, 3, 4, and then he would just have to press enter. And then his drum patch would start. And that's all he would have to do. Start the drum machine, and then we would just carry on, fitting in with Steg's drum machine. And the rappers would just be doing their thing over the top of it. And I was promised a venue, and that particular service provider let me down. So I'm not going to talk about that person, but it left me with a month to go before the gig with no venue.
Fucking hell, man.
So I basically just sat down, opened up the laptop and went through all the venues I knew about in town to see who was free on the 29th of March 2019, which is a Friday night. So for goodness sake, I mean, who on earth would be just sitting waiting to be booked on a Friday?
I know, just sitting next to the computer waiting that wee email. Oh fuck, oh wait a minute, no, it's a fucking email.
That's right.
There'll be one coming.
That's right. So I mean, the one venue that was free was the Barrowlands.
Oh, you're joking, was it? Aye?
No, I'm not joking. So I met up with the guy who runs the Barrowlands, total gent, you know, it's a ye olde style office. Just he took me upstairs, showed me the Barrowlands completely empty, and I didn't. It's a fabulous place, of course, but I didn't realise that when you hire the Barrowlands, you just hire the box, the space. There's no PA system. There's no lighting. There's no seating. There's no nothing. Then once you've hired the space, you have to hire all the other stuff to move into the space for every single gig.
See, aye.
Every single gig has to have, you know,
Its own PA system.
Its own PA system.
Set your own seats, it's no higher than it's already there. Fucking hell, that's mental, isn't it, man?
So, and then he, you know, very friendly, very usefully provides the list of service providers that you will use. And so I looked at that and I thought, you know, there's no way I can fill this place. I haven't got the money to hire all that rig. And I don't know how to sell 1,900 seats in a month's time. So then my sound guy, my sound engineer, Stuart, who runs the Green Room studio around the corner, who's brilliant and who knows everything about the whole city, said, look, have you had a look at the review bar in the Barrowlands, which is usually a wee spill out bar for folk wanting a wee break from upstairs, and it holds 200 standing, and it's basically a wee corner where you can put a band in the corner. And so I came back to the Barrowlands and said, look, we just, there's no way we're going to hire the big place, it's just not feasible, but can I have a look at the review bar? And so he showed it to me and gave it to me for a song, a really, really great price. And Stuart moved in and we advertised it. So we were in the Barrowlands, the iconic Barrowlands. It wasn't a difficult gig at all to set up because we'd done the same gig in the Fairfield Working Men's Club here in Govan, just as a dry run to warm us up. And then we went to the Barrowlands and Dan McGarvey, Loki, he was our warm-up act. So he came and did his stuff, and then we did the air in between. We also did a piece by Gordon McPherson called The Baby Bear's Bed, which is a half-hour slab of contemporary classical electroacoustic music played by those same 10 players. And then we did Steg's album, broken up into 4 sections with bar breaks, and then finally finished at about 11 o'clock. But the funny thing was, in the contract with the Barrowlands, you were obliged to hire a security company.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. So it doesn't matter what you use it for, you've got to hire a security company. So I looked down the list, and there was the recommended security company. So I phoned them up, and I said, right, we got to hire you, you know? So could you do this gig? And they said, yeah, sure, we'll send people around. And I said, it's just the review bar, you know, it's like 200 folk maximum. We actually got on the night, we got 120. So it was really cool. It was a nice turnout, and
you've been fucked if you get the big room, man.
You're absolutely right there. We were not famous.
I heard an echo.
I mean, there was two security people, a man and a woman, down at the front door of the Barrowlands.
I like how they kept gender equal. That's a good thing.
Totally.
That we done well.
Checking people's bags, and it was like one person every 10 minutes.
He's searching people at a boredom like that fucking snip search.
Yes. So I mean, and the security people were absolutely great. They thought this was hilarious that they even needed to bother to turn up for this. But and then people would go up the stairs, and my board members would be sitting there, 2 wonderful ladies handing out a program and taking me the ticket money because I insisted on a proper program where all the information was. And then in they would go, and I was asked at the end of the gig, you know, I asked, was there any trouble? And they said, with what? You know, and it was a really cool gig because you got 50% were the hip hop crowd, and then the other 50% were what I would call the crowd who turn up to my classical gigs.
Oh, I see.
But I cross market.
Would you say the aristocrats?
I would say the grannies and granddads.
Oh, right, aye.
And they were the review bar is good because it's got plenty of standing room, but it's also got cubicles with a kind of 70s black vinyl seating.
Oh,
that kind of thing.
Aye,
and the big chunky tables.
You still smell the fucking spilled pints on it for
you're completely right, and everything's black. So it doesn't matter what
so
you smell.
You can't see the stains.
So
it used to be white when they fucking bust
yes.
on it.
So it was brilliant because we had a really mixed genre crowd who were here to just out of curiosity. McGarvey turned up as Loki and was a good pool for us because we could get a little bit of extra publicity. So that was that was our second hip hop collaboration, and then the third has just happened where I commissioned the guys and Empress Emma Shaw, who's also one of the rappers, to do a whole album on toxic masculinity.
Oh, really? Aye, very good.
And this was because Steg had taken the air in between the album that I was talking about down to Lindisfarne, the festival there.
Right.
And so he was on his DJ laptop playing his stuff, and the rappers were rapping in Lindisfarne. It was a lovely event, apparently. I just saw pictures. And then up they came back in. Hello, darling. Up they came back in.
Woke up for a slumber.
Yeah. Listening to me, who can blame her? They came back up and drove straight into the Govan riots.
Oh, you're fucking kidding, man.
Which was the
Remember
20,
that?
I think it was the
Fucking
30th.
James Connolly band, they were all causing it in the Govan Road. They were fucking, it was pure war.
Yes.
I remember that.
So that was just like, it was the Republican flute band who could not get out of Elder Park because they weren't being allowed to.
Yeah,
And then it was
part lockdown.
the police, and then it was those who wished to stop in all in black balaclavas, trying to prevent them going down Govan Road past the War Memorial. That was the ultimate.
Is that
thing.
the idea then? Is that really what it basically
Yes.
stemmed for?
Yes, to stop them marching past the War Memorial near the Pearson.
See, I thought it was a better reason than that. I'm saying I didn't realise that was.
Apparently not. But anyway, so we decided to write the next album on that, and on that whole smorgasbord of, toxic masculinity. Where do you start with that? But the rappers did a great job. They released the album in February, so now we're waiting for that time where we can get back on stage and perform that as well.
Gig the live album.
Gig the live album, exactly. I have no idea when we're going to be able to do that, because my feeling is that whilst it looks like we'll trickle back to something level zero-y for summer, there's going to be the Sri Lankan variant, the Canadian variant, the El Salvadorian variant. There's going to be the Postal variant.
Fucking I said the salt and chili variant, I said the lockdown sauce, know what I mean? That's what it's turning into. It's like fucking World Buffet with all these fucking variants, man.
It's really, it's mental. So I'm expecting all of that situation to get worse again, autumn, winter.
Oh, it'll get worse, but better. Worse, better.
Yeah.
Worse, better. And it'll get to a point about lockdown. Remember we could go it.
I know.
As if we can't go it, but remember Naked was telling us we couldn't go it.
I know. So the truth is, I don't know how to plan anything, nor does anybody else.
No, you plan it. If you book it, you'll end up disappointed, because looking at my shit that's getting booked, people booking parties, shit like that, then putting on gigs, then they're taking tickets, then it's right, we need to put this off, get your money back, or we'll refund it, or we'll get you a ticket for the next one. It's just putting off and putting off. It's a very optimistic person that books an event in these times.
Very
in the future,
optimistic.
definitely, man.
Yeah.
Unless it's 5 years in the future when you're kind of like that, right? But even 5 years, fucking the way everything's going, I'd be fucking surprised in 5 years for no still in the same shit. Right, we're going out of lockdown soon. Right, oh, but there's another variant or this shit. Vaccine doesn't work. Oh, I know we said it last time, but the vaccine doesn't work.
Yeah.
Fucking point taking it in. Know what I mean? It's not worth a fuck. Stick up your ass. That's it. Know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
But I've got my view, and I had to get
You
that.
had to get that out.
I had
You got
to,
it.
sorry, I had to. I was like one of the ones. I wasn't in the podcast. So obviously that was the last thing you done. So have you done with Steg G and that? So as you're saying, you're just waiting for everything to open back up to. On that kind of hope that everything opens back up soonish, so you can start then putting on live performances a bit.
We did some film performances of stuff in October and November last year in the Pierce Institute, because I tried to sell the venues and just let people be aware of what's good. And the good thing is, because we're in Govan, we're in the middle of TV land. So you've got Film City, you've got BBCS TV literally down the road, and there's a lot of ancillary industries around. And so I walked into Progressive, who are next to Galgale on Fairley Street. And Progressive has been around forever.
Is that the one that's at the Govan Hall?
It's up from Govan Town Hall.
Do you know what I'm talking about? It's in Govan Hall. It's like an extras agency or something like that.
There's loads of different agencies in Govan Town Hall, loads of production companies.
See.
So the Town Hall is now just 4 small companies that do big films. And they've also got the main hall at the back is a sound stage, so they film Mrs. Brown and her boys in Govan Town Hall.
Oh, do they?
Yes.
I didn't know that, no.
Next to me,
That's right next door, that's fucking right next door, that's his neighbour.
Exactly.
But you don't hear them, man, it's that close.
I can see the film sets at my back.
Yes.
I can never tell what they're doing at the time, but fucking Mrs. Brown.
I just knew there was an extra agency in there, but you always see like the trailers at the back and that shit. It looks, right now it's like you don't know if it's a fucking COVID centre or what, man. It's got the same hallmarks, know what I mean?
Yeah.
Big white rails and fences up.
So there's an awful lot of that where I would just be able to access. I literally live 2 minutes around the corner from the warehouse where you hire the sound equipment, and Progressive where you hire the cameras, and they know people who know people, and so it's actually very, very quick that you can put together a production company.
So you're saying you can hire the equipment off them?
Yes.
But for yourself to use?
Yes. Not for me to use. I don't know how to use it.
No, but it's for the name project.
Yeah. So I have a project. I'm saying I want to film a piece of music, and then we do a site recce, and then they give me a quote, and then I look at it and I think, all right. But they know all the camera people that they can book in, and the producers who can all set it up. And it's a bit ad hoc and it's a bit thrown together, but that's all you can do at very short notice, because everything you produce now has to be at short notice, because you don't know when the next regulatory slam is going to be hit you.
No, definitely. That's the only thing you can guarantee, that there's going to be a fucking more restrictions.
Yeah.
That's the only thing you can plan for.
Yes.
Can't plan for fuck all else.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, the events sector, I have no idea where that's going to go or how it's going to recover. It's a really, the whole events sector. I'm not just talking about music, the lot, conferences, the works. I mean, it's going to be hilarious in a very, very strange sort of way if they actually pull off COP26 in Govan in the first 2 weeks of November.
COP26?
The climate conference.
Oh, right.
Where you have Air Force One arriving at Glasgow Airport and 150 private jets with world leaders arriving in Glasgow to do the SECC and to discuss the future of the planet.
Fucking hell, man. Couldn't have picked a better place to do it. I fucking smack bang in the middle of Govan.
Exactly. So they decided to come to Govan to discuss the future of the Earth. So the SECC, and a great choice of colours, by the way. The SECC is called the Blue Zone.
Right.
And the Science Centre is called the Green Zone.
Fuck's sake, man. That's
they got
going
the
to go
colours
down well.
completely the wrong way around. So
Boys only have their own type of flute.
Exactly. So the Blue Zone is where all the diplomats and heads of state and Joe Biden and co are going to sit down and thrash out what not to do. And then the Science Centre is going to be where all the talks and performances and all the extra stuff is going to be. But nobody's talking about the 30,000 groupies who will arrive with the climate conference, because I was at on one of these Zoom conferences a couple of months ago. I got put in a random breakout chat room with a lady in Texas who's an academic on climate, and she started talking. I didn't realise, but actually there's 30,000 diehard groupies who have gone to every single one of these climate conferences since they began.
Fuck's sake.
And this is their holiday.
You're following the band.
Basically, this is their big jolly around the world to take selfies whilst protesting against governments. And they will be landing in the middle of Govan too.
Oh fuck, nobody fucking feeling herself at a place, man. Know what I mean? She'll probably have a few thousand merchants kicking up fuck because there's a blue zone or there's one because there's a green zone. Know what I mean? Just turning up football colours and all, not with flares and shit.
Yes,
absolutely. They'll fit in quite well, man. But I'm looking forward to that. When did you say it was?
It's the first 2 weeks of November.
First 2 weeks in November. Fucking put that in your calendar, man.
I've got it up here. 26th UN Climate Change Conference, 1st to the 12th of November. Aye.
Yep.
I just want to go to that.
Oh fuck's sake! It'll be fucking shut off everywhere, man. It'll be a nightmare to get by.
You're totally right. I mean, there are places like Kinning Park Complex, and that's going to get opened August, September, which are going to be completely taken over by fringe events. Other venues in Govan are being approached that are just going to be swamped with people who want a place to crash out or hippie out or whatever they want to do. The whole of Govan's going to be. I don't know how much of Govan's actually going to really seriously notice, because it's a bit. The whole area of deep multiple deprivation meets climate change thing. It's a bit. It doesn't work.
No, nobody gives a shit. No.
Exactly. If you haven't got any money for a carbon footprint, then why on earth should you care?
I know.
And it's really, if you have a carbon footprint, it's because you're wealthy enough to have a carbon footprint. And if you're trying to reduce your carbon footprint, you've got to be wealthier still to afford to reduce your carbon footprint. So I mean, anybody who's living on the breadline, anybody who's living in poverty, doesn't have a carbon footprint anyway to speak of.
The thing is, they're all coming in individual private jets, so there's going to be 30 private jets coming into Glasgow Airport. What's the carbon footprint of that?
At least, yes.
At least, aye.
The thing is as well, it's quite ironic, like they're having a climate change conference in a place where the climate changes every fucking 5 minutes. You get sunburn and frostbite in the same day, you know what I mean?
No, maybe maybe they're here to drive the point home.
Uh-huh.
This is the future of your weather. Glasgow, everywhere in the world like Glasgow, unless you do something now.
I should just bring one Glaswegian up, pure chalk white in the middle. I'll just get the fucking pure sleeve sunburn. Like, it's fucking brutal by the way, man. You don't know how good you have got it. No, I hear no get money for this, pal. Money, man, know what I mean? And it's true, but man, I fucking wear like yesterday. Yeah, I'm jumping about with a jumper jacket and a pair of shorts. Know what I mean? I'm looking like a fucking I'm on holiday for the legs down.
For
And
just
then
£1 a week you can get this man a sunbed.
that's it. The conference I can maybe turn up and meet a couple of hippies, man, bring them back for a podcast.
Oh, I think you'll have a great time podcasting in those 2 weeks.
Oh, definitely,
You
man.
should definitely get out there and do a live outside broadcast.
Checking out these cunts, man. I should do a sketch. Fucking aye, plenty of ideas.
Joe Biden on.
Aye, that's it, man. Joe Biden, get him in, old pensioner.
Yep.
Nah, that'd be a heavy good shout.
I might do that.
100%. But is there anything else you'd like to like, kind of promote about on the podcast? Anything else you've got coming up?
If anybody makes it this far into the podcast,
Oh, he's a very articulate people. He's either old guys and you love your classical music.
I know. The answer is, I've got loads of things planned, but it's about raising money, and it's about getting the charity back on its feet. Right now, what I'm caring about is finishing off the Glasgow Artists in Residence for Govan, which means the pieces that I'm getting locals to write for me. I'm making wee videos out of them and getting them up onto line. But at the moment, the whole thing is digital. So if anybody wants to see what's going on, they just visit the Glasgow Bands on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or TikTok. We're on that now.
Oh, he's on TikTok.
We are on TikTok.
TikTok's taking off, man. It's fucking mental. I refuse to get TikTok. Oh, I didn't refuse. I tried it a couple of times, just wasn't for me. Then I seen a guy get a free album deal with Sony for doing fucking sea shanties.
Nathan Evans.
Nathan Evans, aye.
Yes.
You know him?
Well, no, but he rescued me because I was invited into schools from January onwards this year to do playground sessions of music in the freezing cold with poor little kids. We taught
But out in the playground?
because I'm not allowed to.
Oh, I said no.
We're not allowed to make music indoors. That would be a spreader.
In case coronavirus hears it and comes in and was like, I like that music, it'll infect us.
And I got to Nathan Evans and the Weller Man before everybody else did, and taught the kids how to sing with the Weller Man. And I just tried it once. I thought, oh, thank goodness that's over. And then they would just keep coming up to me and saying, can we sing the Weller Man, please? Can we sing the Weller Man, please? And it's such a great story because it's about New Zealand. It's 1860s, 1870s, New Zealand whaling. And it's about a whale that gets harpooned by a ship, but the whale doesn't want to get reeled in and the ship doesn't want to get let go, so the whale basically drags the ship around the South Seas for 40 years, and the Wellerman is actually the name of Wellerman and Co., which is a supply company who ship out supplies to the whaling ships whilst they're out whaling.
Right.
And they take the carcasses off the whaling ships and put back on supplies, and then return to New Zealand with the carcasses. So it's got some really cool history.
Is this a bit actually based on the fucking reality then?
No. It's one of those old Moby Dick sea salt tales. But it's all about man's fight with nature, etc. Blah blah blah. But it's actually a damn good tune, and the kids absolutely love singing it. And because it's Nathan Evans on TikTok, you see, they're totally into it.
Oh, I see. I took after him, man. Definitely. Aye, good luck to him, man. But I do a lot less sea shanties, a lot more piracy, let's just put it that way, you know what I mean?
I'm saying nothing.
No comment, all that.
that.
That's the fucking motto of the podcast, I should have wrote it on that.
Yep.
But anyway, Paul, it's been a pleasure speaking to you. Thanks very much for joining me, my man.
Thank you for the invitation.
No worries,
A
my
real
man. It's been
pleasure.
absolutely interesting talking to you. Premeditated par. Catches.